6 minutes after 10. Thank you so much for staying with us. It is the second hour of the show. Now, as I said last week on the show and also this morning, the story about equal education that's currently in the news is incredibly important because equal education, I don't know how one might characterize them. I think they started out as a pressure group that was a thorn in the side of the Minister of Basic Education in particular. But it has become an organization that is so much more than that. It is one of our best organizations in the social justice sector, and it has evolved the way the TAC has, the way the AIDS Law Project became Section 27. And in a sense, they have reconfigured their place in the South African landscape by thinking about it in terms of fundamentally dignity and the inherent dignity that everyone has. And what's been particularly beautiful, especially for us older farts, is how young people have taken up the cudgels of leadership within equal education and demonstrating that young people are ready to lead. And it has been an organization that has really blossomed and gone from strength to strength. And then last week, we suddenly had a whole series of articles in Mail and Guardian, including a lead article last week implicating male leaders in all sorts of accusations of sexual harassment, bullying, and all sorts of other things. And now there is a conversation that has to be opened up both about equal education and about the social justice sector as well. And one of the people that is mentioned by the Mail and Guardian, in fact, a picture of him appeared on the front page, is Zackie Achmat. We all know who Zackie is, co-founder of the TAC and many other organizations. His activism is well known in South Africa and also internationally. And Zackie was the chair of the board of equal education and had been accused of covering up for some of the men specifically that have been mentioned. And Zackie had agreed to an exclusive interview on this platform to try and deal with some of these allegations, and in fact is here with me in the studio. We are also live streaming this interview on the 702 Facebook page. Zackie, thank you so much for making the effort to be in studio and for coming in to engage on these issues.
Right, Eusebius, the most important thing to remember is that I initiated the call to you to be on the show today.
That's right.
Because I feel that people who are extremely powerful, particularly men, have a duty to be scrutinized. And for me, that was critical. And I think I'm no less than any other man. And in that sense, let me start out by saying that I believe in the reverse onus when it comes to complainants of sexual harassment, sexual violence, sexual misconduct, rape. And the reason I believe that is because patriarchy exists within all of us, within me, within you, within every part of our society. And therefore, the reverse onus is important. At the same time, I believe that when someone is put on trial, there must be due process. And when there's an inquiry, people must be put on due process. I believe that the Mail and Guardian transgressed the press code, and I will be laying a complaint with the press ombudsman. And I believe it for this reason. The manner in which they gathered their news was unjust, hurtful, painful to me personally and to other people. This involves an inquiry that was held in 2011. And looking back at it, there are many things that could be said about that inquiry. But the first thing to say about it is it involved the person who came forward to complain, to actually put his name to a complaint, was a chappie called Joey Hassan. And he did it as the best friend of Doron Isaacs. And they literally had love for each other as comrades because they were together in the Jewish youth movement Abonim. And for someone to come forward and put allegations down, the most important thing about those allegations is on paper, and I've sent you some of those things. On paper, there was nothing that we could have and I wasn't part of the inquiry, but there was nothing there, and Joey couldn't bring any further information forward. And people like Charlotte Fisher and Daniel McIntosh and others, Kira Schlesinger, were given an opportunity to provide evidence. They failed to do so. The inquiry even stayed open 2 months after. And so from where I sit, if you look at the board, who was appointed to the inquiry, I was out the country. I was in Palestine at the time. Immediately on Doron asking for it, I said yes to an inquiry. I asked Professor Paula Ensor to deal with it because she was the head of the Human Resources Committee of Equal Education, and with her the manager of Equal Education, Michelle Adler. And on the committee was Nathan Geffen and Sean Feinberg. To the best of my knowledge, none of those people have ever done anything that leads me to question their integrity.
Let's slow down a little bit for those people who do not know the details as intimately as I have come to know, and that you know even more than I do, Zackie. So obviously, the first major news that hit the news cycle was in relation to, firstly, the former General Secretary, Tsepo Motsepe. Several women that the Mail and Guardian had spoke to had alleged to have been sexually harassed by him. He is now the former General Secretary. He has resigned from that particular position. Then there was a story involving Luyolo Mazwembi in a job for sex allegation against him as well. And then the sort of third wave in the stories over the last couple of days or so, the last week or so, then was the Treasurer, Deron Isaacs, also a founding member of Equal Education. And they had spoken to at least 3 women that had alleged that Deron Isaacs had sexually assaulted them, and at least 12 female staff members who allege institutional failure currently, but also going back almost 10 years. In addition to that, my show, when people caught wind of the fact that my producer Megan and I are examining these claims beyond the Mail and Guardian story, also reached out to us. We have to date spoken to about 8 or 9 people, including 1 man, by the way, and a lot of women have come forward and told us their story as well. Now, when you look at scores of women over a period of some 10 years, those who have spoken to the Mail and Guardian and the ones who have actually reached out to my team, Zackie, I mean, surely you believe then that they had been let down institutionally by Equal Education and by yourself?
First, I don't know the period. I don't know the specific allegations. That's the first thing to say. The second thing I would go to say here, Eusebius, and that is where I believe people are unfair, in this sense, that Equal Education is an organization that has reached tens of thousands of people. It has had hundreds of staff members. It has acted against facilitators who attempted to have, or didn't attempt, but they had consensual relations with people. It has summarily dismissed those people. And I can't speak for Equal Education because I was last in Equal Education in 2012. So I can't speak of what happened subsequently. And perhaps I should have taken more care because it's an organization that is deeply close to me in the sense of what it has achieved. So in that sense, yes, there may be institutional failures, right? But who addressed the question of Tsepo Motsepe? It was 3 young people in Equal Education, his subordinates. Right? He's complained about that, and I think perhaps he even has some complaint there. But the fact of the matter is that young people in Equal Education who are strong, those who won't, they prepared to deal with this question. I would like you to have a show where you actually have some of the women in Equal Education who've run workshops across the country on the question of sexual harassment, and I think we must, as civil society, do a lot more.
But my point is that before we even get to the particular individuals, a Charlotte here, a Daniel there, just at the number of levels, in terms of the volume of women, we're talking here about combined between our investigation so far, it's not even an investigation, it's women who approached us, and the Mail and Guardian story. We're talking here about now close to about 20 people. Some of them may be people who spoke to us individually. We don't corroborate our journalism because we work separately. And that is over a number of years, going as far back at least as to 2011. If it is true that you have a reverse onus as a matter of principle as an activist that you take on, then there should be a presumption of believing that Equal Education had indeed institutionally over a long period of time let down women as a matter of routine.
Well, I think that is both a matter for a really deep public inquiry. I really honestly believe that. And it's not difficult for me to concede that that is perhaps the case. I'm not there sufficiently to acknowledge what goes on in its human resources department, among its senior staff and so on. But let me say this for them. The young people that I know will not tolerate sexual harassment and so on. I really believe that, and I will stand by them in saying that. What I don't believe is that any organization has dealt with this question sufficiently, and that's not an excuse.
I want to play a clip. You mentioned Charlotte. Let's hear Charlotte in her own voice. Charlotte is someone who was part of Equal Education briefly. She has now been quoted in the Mail and Guardian yesterday as well, and she also has spoken to us, and she speaks her truth, and this is what Charlotte had to say about her experiences at Equal Education. Zackie, I just want you to listen to this audio and then we'll discuss it.
Yeah.
Firstly, I started following up on some of these stories and just asking women, listen, I don't, this isn't my business, and I don't want to put you in an awkward position, but I'm concerned because I'm in a role in the movement, and these people have said this thing to me, and I wondered if that's not true, that's absolutely fine, but if it is true, I wondered if you wanted to talk about it with anyone. I ended up speaking to 4 women who all told stories that were so similar. I mean, that is the thing I also want to just raise, is that some people have come forward and been very brave, but those tropes were similar to everyone. They often started on live sexual encounters. The stories that I heard then were never of non-consensual situations, although I've heard stories since now that are. And the stories all happened that when a relationship soured, and obviously the context of it was that it was a relationship with their boss, and it was a relationship that had to be kept secret. And I want to be really clear about that, no one is suggesting that you can't have office romances ever in any context, but the specifics of these situations were that they had to be kept secret because the boss was cheating. And normally, if you're having a relationship with someone with an organisation with a power difference, one of the ways you protect people is that you are open and honest on the record in a way that allows people to be protected both from unfair punishment, but also from unfair rewards. And in these situations, the women never had that, and actually at the end, they were always threatened. They always had a situation where they were told that into themselves, if they spoke about this, they wouldn't work again in the Western Cape NGO sector. And also they had stories told about them. The repeated tropes were, oh, that woman was crazy. That woman was malicious. That woman is someone that we cannot trust. And there's only so many times you can hear women being described as crazy or malicious or just not someone to trust. But no one seems to have a clear story of why before you start asking questions.
Okay, now on Charlotte's version, she joins Equal Education, and within minutes, a lot of women start speaking to her. She tells us that she then approaches Professor Paula Ensor with what she had heard from some of these women who had not of their own accord approached Paula. This is, Zackie, what Charlotte says, how the conversation between her and Paula went when she approached Paula to investigate.
I ended up calling Professor Ensor. By this point, I had testimonies, I had some records, I even had an academic thesis that someone had written in part about Duran's behaviour in social justice spaces. And I called Professor Ensor. I tried to meet her, but she wouldn't meet me. And I called Professor Ensor to say, I'm not someone who's been harassed, but I am in contact with people who have been. And I didn't call secretly. I called in my own name. I said who I was. And I want to make sure that they have a chance to tell their stories if they want to.
Yes.
And I want to gain from you also some assurance about how would they be protected. And the response I got, I remember the first thing after I said that, there was this pause, and Professor Ensor said to me, what you're saying is slander. You could be sued for slander for this.
Wow.
And my response was, well, I'm not a lawyer, but the first thing I know about slander is that it has to not be true.
Wow. And how did you feel when she responded as such? Because presumably you approached her because you thought that she would be an ally for vulnerable women?
Absolutely, absolutely. Not just because she was a woman, but because she was on the inquiry. And I think that it raises such an important point, which is that, I was 23 and incredibly naive, and I'd identified that there seemed to be this perpetrator, but the truth is that perpetrators don't tend to be able to get away with repeatedly perpetrating without having enablers.
You can't speak for Paula, but that's deeply problematic.
I'd like you to read yourself, because you wowed Charlotte Fisher. I'd like you to read.
I did wow, because like you, I presume that women tell the truth when they speak to us.
Yes, I do. But please read that.
What do you want me to read?
The email.
Paula's communication with Charlotte.
Yes.
It says, "Dear Charlotte, when we spoke on the 16th of June, you indicated to me that you intended to either obtain the names of 3 people or encourage these 3 people to come forward to the EE board subcommittee with complaints about Deron. It is now 2 months later. I have delayed responding to you until I had met with the subcommittee, which conducted the initial investigation. I did this last night, and I'm now communicating with you to indicate that since these 3 names have not emerged in any form and no complaint has been lodged, that this matter is now closed." Paula, what follows from that?
What does that say to you? That Paula, Ms. Fisher, denies that Paula contacted her to ask for information, and that is a slanderous statement against someone who wanted to take action. Paula wanted to take action, and I think Paula can speak for herself.
No, that's not good enough, Zackie. Firstly, the slander that Charlotte refers to there is Paula saying that her remarks alleging Deron to be a predator constitutes slander. Now, if I'm going to come to you and I say to you, Zackie, Edwin or Marva has done the following, and you say, Eusebius, careful, you're being slanderous towards Edwin. No. You are immediately disincentivizing me from contacting you beyond that.
Of course, that would be a question. What is critical is if Charlotte had so much documentary evidence. This was after the inquiry, right? Charlotte was fully aware, and more than fully aware, that the inquiry had been set up, and she could have forwarded the information to the inquiry. She could, if she didn't want to, she could have given it to Joey, with whom she was close friends, or is still close friends.
But Zackie, I'm sorry, this just doesn't wash. Because there are reasons why people that confess in women, rather than patriarchal men like myself and you, do not routinely just come forward and speak to Zackie Achmat. And that's the heart of the matter. Hear me out before you respond. I mean, let's look at the terms of the inquiry that you set up in 2011. Because this inquiry that exonerated Deron is deeply flawed procedurally and substantively. You, as the chairperson of the board, asked this subcommittee to interrogate the following questions. Now listen to your own wording. Yeah. Question 1, can any evidence be provided by the people who are spreading the rumors or making the allegations that there's a connection between EE and any of the women named? If there is such a connection, is there any evidence that connects the women to Deron Isaacs beyond the rumors? If the above questions are answered affirmatively, then the rumors must be tested against the EE policy on sexual harassment and sexual misconduct. I mean, the entire set of questions there center malicious rumor mongering as the default language and framework with which you want the subcommittee to approach this thing. That is not a victim-centered approach.
Well, Eusebius, that may very well be the case.
Do you agree that it is?
No. Hold on. I think you need to look at the context. Let's look at the context of this question. The context is first and foremost that this is a group of friends who fell out. That's the first question. And some of them are super rich kids. At the time, they were young people, very young people. In that context, rumors started surfacing. And let's call a rumor. When there's no one coming forward and you hear, if I hear Eusebius stole money, as I have heard, right? If I hear something like that, I would say, give me the evidence, right? Because otherwise it remains a rumor. Right? And in that sense, it's critical for me to confront the person and say, please, not confront in a horrible way, but confront and say, give me the evidence. Now, if you look at what Paula writes and what I write, is there was at that point, and I'm not going to say, I will concede that given what has happened subsequently in public discourse, that we needed to do more. I will concede that. Right? But if someone says to you, Eusebius has stolen, and then I say to the person, give me the evidence, then, and they don't come up with it, I go forward?
That's not what you did. We have to be clear here. You started out this conversation by saying the principle that you and I can take as common cause between us as a good guiding principle is a presumption of believing women and shifting the onus to people who are alleged to be perpetrators. And we don't need to justify that. It goes with the routine nature of sexual predation in our society.
Of patriarchy.
Absolutely. Now, if that is true, there's nothing in the 3 the scope of the investigation, you can go back on your words. There's nothing in your communication to the subcommittee you set up to now investigate Daron that speaks to the question of what can we do to have a victim-centered process so that the women who might have told their stories to a Charlotte Fisher can actually feel safe enough to come and speak to us on the subcommittee. Instead, what you have is you center the idea of malicious rumor mongering. And what that tells me is that when you center language like malicious rumor mongering, that there is in fact by implication, there is a default position of incredulity of the stories.
Hold on. No. The first thing I would say is let me read. Let me find something here. One of the questions that I raised was to protect the privacy of women. You would know that I was at a distance of 10,000 miles. It was not the women who asked for the inquiry. It was Daron. Right? And Daron asked because he felt under a cloud. He was someone we trusted, and it was critical for him to have an inquiry. Now, would you assume that I would say no to an inquiry? No, I wouldn't. And to the extent that I referred it to the subcommittee, I said I will be out of the country. You may choose to examine the allegations directly or seek the assistance of an independent, competent and mature person. Would I do that if I believed that a woman doesn't have a right to be heard? No, I wouldn't. And this was a preliminary inquiry. Now let me speak to you directly. One of the women who made an against women allegation was made that she was an American intern who had an affair with Daron. The only evidence that we saw in relation to that woman is that she was gang raped. And she was gang raped by a group of boys who were staying in a house. And she turned to Daron Isaacs and Michelle Adler to deal with it. Now you tell me, how on earth could we say that he was guilty of sexual misconduct in that? Now I would go back to you and say this to you. If I was writing it now, I would write it very differently, because the time was a very different time. Pressure was critical. Daron felt that there were rumors, and there were rumors, because nothing had come to me directly until I spoke to Joey Hassan.
Okay, I want to take a break here. I wonder whether we can just agree on this fact, that if you center, and I accept that the moral frameworks have changed swiftly after #MeToo, the globe over. I'm not here to cast aspersions on you. All of us have to catch up with the shifting moral frameworks over the last 2 years that young people have gifted us. But do you accept, even if it's with the benefit of hindsight, that the language that you use
definitely with the benefit of hindsight,
doesn't matter, but just hear me out. Well, you got to be careful what you agree to, that it is deeply misogynistic to center language that presupposes malicious rumor mongering when women have more reason not to allege perpetration than, in fact, they do.
No. If a woman had approached me directly, I would have said this. I wouldn't have accepted that as a rumor. I would have listened to her. What you deliberately misconstrue, and I'll say that, is that this was a group of friends who were talking about each other. That none of those people directly came forward and said that they were sexually harassed, sexual misconduct. And that is the context in the way the word rumor was used.
We're in conversation with Zackie Achmat, who had been accused in a story, the Mail and Guardian, of covering up for sexual predation at Equal Education, where he was previously the chair of the board. Zackie, what is your relationship with Daron Isaacs?
My relationship with Daron Isaacs goes back to 2002. He made me an anti-Zionist. He is one of the smartest people I know. He is someone who has bravely put his himself on the line to help build organizations over time. I think he's certainly contributed in a way that most young people of white privilege never have. And so in that sense, I regard him as one of the best activists. Is that an endorsement of sexual predatory or anything like that? No, I don't believe that is the case. It's my relationship on which it is based with him. That's what my relationship on him is based. Is he a man who's aware of his racial privilege? Yes. Is he a man that is aware of his power as an activist? I don't think fully. And I would say this to him in the sense that if you walk into the building in Khayelitsha where equal education is asked, that building wouldn't exist without him. So when he walks into the building with his shorts, and like any, with a great sense of deference and humility towards young people, he doesn't realize that despite that, everyone in that building realize the exceptional power that he has as an activist. So in that sense, my relationship with him is one of deep care, like he is a son to me. And I firmly believe that anyone, if I had a son and he did anything that was wrong, I will go to court with him, I will stand by him, but if he did something wrong, I would insist, I wouldn't wave a flag for him.
In your estimation, is Deron Isaacs a sexual predator?
Let me put this to you in this way. If there are women who come forward, and Lindsay Burke has come forward, she's the one woman who has publicly said that he harassed her online and so on. And in that sense, I have to believe her, and I do believe her until, and Deron is given an explanation for that, until there's any inquiry that proves otherwise. And we agreed at the beginning of this that there's a formal process, there's the beginning of the process, there's a moral process of a reverse onus, and there should also be some form of legal process in which there's a reverse onus.
From a journalistic point of view, for the record, for those who are listening to this conversation, we had reached out to all of the men who have directly been implicated in allegations of sexual harassment and bullying. Tsepo Motsepo told to us that he had spoken to his lawyer about giving interviews, and he's not going to be giving interviews. We spoke to Deron Isaacs for comment, and he wrote to Megan, my producer, and he said, "Hi Megan, I deny the allegations. Never ever in my life have I been forceful with a woman, nor issued threats. I will await an independent inquiry by EE, where there will be an opportunity for due process and take consideration of all the evidence. Thank you, Deron." And we also reached out to the now former head of national organizing, Luyolo Mazwemba, and we did not get a response. Do you think that perhaps you were over-invested in Deron as a young person that you think is the future in terms of leadership in this sector? Someone who is also mutually loving of you, to the extent that I've seen documentation of him even setting up a trust to try and raise money for you for retirement, for example. Yeah. Do you have sufficient proximity from this man to be able to really speak authoritatively about him, given how invested you are in his entire life?
First, let me raise, you're raising my financial situation. If you go into my bank account, you will see that I'm in debt to the tune of 300,000 rand. That's my financial situation. If you go to how many dependents I support at least 6 dependents. So I think that's a question to raise. Am I specially invested in Deron? There are many young people who will tell you, and I prefer you to speak to them directly. Many young people who will tell you that not only do I love them in the same way, if not more than I love Deron, and I would stand by them in the same way that that a parent would stand by their children. And I'm a gay man, I don't have children. So in that sense,
we can have kids, by the way.
Oh, but ek is nou te oud. Ek is nou te oud vir dit. I mean, I'm not some of the people who have children at 71.
For me, there are many important moments in this conversation, and many conversations we will have, and you and I off air have committed to some conversations that you and I still want to have. This is a limited 1-hour conversation. I want to come to what really has troubled me for it's given me sleepless nights, because here we need some deep self-examination. I want to play a clip. And some of the voices we've had to hide in this particular clip. These are examples of women who do not experience Deron in the way that you experienced Deron, and they must be allowed to speak for themselves. And the fact that they even wanted protection some of them keep saying, I'm going to go on air, I'm not going to go on air. Yes, Megan, I can speak. No. Muffle my voice. No, you speak it. I want to examine that as well. But before we get there, let's actually play a clip that will give us a sense of what some of these women that we are all anthropologizing in this conversation actually say for themselves. The one that did reach out to us, and many prevaricated and then decided not to.
It was a toxic work environment where staff were treated very poorly and bullied by management. The Zackie factor is that the management team were handpicked by him and groomed by him. So how could you challenge these managers who were endorsed by Nobel Prize nominee, deans of universities, and constitutional court judges? As a result, individual staff members could be dismissed and their concerns ignored. Yoliso played a role in the sexist environment, which was really disappointing, as she should have been looking out for the rest of the female staff. She would openly say things like gender is just a middle-class issue, and in one instance concerns were raised about a man who had a drinking problem but was a tutor to the high school students known as equalizers. Surrounding him were also rumors that he had sexually assaulted a woman who had some kind of disability. I was asked to travel outside of Cape Town with him, and I said I was uncomfortable based on the rumors and the drinking. Instead of addressing my concerns, she dismissed me and implied that I was a racist.
For me, Zackie was a role model, and I mean, after the incident, Zackie even unfriended me on Facebook.
What incident? Let's be specific.
Like after he had went to shout everyone, after he had learned about me coming forward with the personal issue that was used against me and the questions I was raising in terms of racism that was happening within the organization. I was very isolated by everyone. A lot of people blocked me from BPM. A lot of people unfriended me on Facebook. I think at EE, if they like you, they protect you as far as possible, and they do everything they protect you, whatever you do, until you reach a certain point where they no longer have use for you. Like, people would, like, the fact that Luyono sleeps with equalizers, it's an open secret. Everyone knows about it, but they've never actually took a stand and done something about it. It's always been an open secret. Everyone knows it. Some people in management, they were facilitators within Luyono, they were equalizers within Luyono, so they know his behavior. It didn't sit well with me. That's why after some time I cut ties with EE, because for me, it became a place that's anti-women and anti-black women, poor black women, because they took advantage, like the facilitators that slept with equalizers, they took advantage of black young women who were vulnerable, who needed someone to look up to.
I think it's important to state that the culture is the one that enabled the regulations that are coming out. It's the one that enabled what happened to those women to happen. It was an environment in which women were preyed upon, and in which only a few voices were privileged. The environment made it clear that only the voices of the senior management team, who received largely unquestioning support from a board comprised of powerful figures, including Zackie Achmat, were the voices that mattered.
When I tried to raise this, and then I tried to raise it along with the racism I thought was happening within the organization. And after I had raised it, I heard that Zackie actually came to Wendy House to talk to people about the Roma behead on Durham, and he basically shouted to everyone in Wendy House about spreading rumors that would change the organization's name. And in that meeting, no one actually said anything, and I then received the call to say, because I was called to a private meeting to actually discuss me coming forward in raising nasty issues. And I was told that I'm actually going to be crushed in that meeting, and I was very scared, and I'm actually very even afraid because the details of the story kind of really reveals who I am. So I'm actually not sure how to even go about it in terms of telling it.
Okay, I hope you could hear the audio there. I think it was sufficiently clear. We had to give, Megan, my producer, had to give a commitment to the folks that she had interviewed in order to protect their identities, that we would not in fact use the normal sound of the recording. Zackie, what comes up for you as you listen to some of those descriptions and claims?
Well, the first thing is, if they are true, they must be investigated. Right? That's the first. The second thing is, I'd like to know how many of them were women, because it sounded like there were a significant number of men among them. Now, the fact of because you said we're going to listen to the voices of women, so
7 women.
No, of the one speaking on the
7 women. Yeah,
right.
We changed it just to be able to make it impossible to detect their identities.
That's perfectly fine then. So, from my point of view, I think it's critical that those people come forward and I be given an opportunity to look them in the eye, and if I did wrong, to say sorry. Let's be, and if necessary, give reparations. Right?
But now here's my question, Zackie, and I'm sorry to ask you this because it's a painful question to ask, but I think in some ways, from a moral point of view, this is the most important question for me that I wanted to ask you.
Yeah.
Have you, as Zackie Achmat, reflected on what it is about you? Hold on, Zackie. You are Zackie Achmat.
Go on.
Have you reflected on the question, what is it about me as Zackie that have not made me a safe space for these women hitherto to come directly to me?
Okay, the first is I may not have been on the board at the time, so I don't know the dates of the thing, of the complaint or the allegation or the experience that people say. I can't fully answer that, but I can tell you that many people are scared of me. They fear me, and they fear me some for good reason, because I can tell you I have sacked people who are corrupt. There was one incident in the Treatment Action Campaign where the minute a man had gone to his girlfriend's house and threatened to burn it down, he was a secretary. I approached the Gauteng committee and said, go to his house, take his T-shirt away and summarily expel him. Ask the woman to come in and say, we will stand by you if you lay charges, but we're expelling him. And that man hung himself. Do I feel guilty that he hung himself? I can't feel guilty for that. But did we act correctly? We acted to the best of our ability. I'm a very powerful person. Sometimes I have what I laughingly tell people my grandfather faced. My grandfather was one of the most decent human beings. But when he sat down at an eating table and he got a dirty glass, he threw it against the wall, right? And I recognize that in myself. And I'm now 56 years old. I've been in public life for more than 40. And not a day goes past when I don't think about what I eat, how I behave, where I walk, whether I greet people, whether I look them in the eye, and whether I speak to them. So, in that sense, I constantly try to look at my own behavior, because I'm a Foucauldian in that sense, that every night before I sleep, I think about what I've done wrong or right.
Do you think you have toxic masculinity in you that make it hard for women to approach you?
Let me put it, it's easy to use current slogans. And is my masculinity toxic? There are aspects of my masculinity that is toxic. Of that, I wouldn't. But there's aspects of my masculinity that is difficult, very difficult to deal with. And there are aspects of my masculinity that I've dealt with in a harsh way. Anyone will tell you. A counsel in court the other day was going on, and I used to be friends with this woman, was going on about how poor people didn't deserve living close to the city. And she and a bunch of white lawyers tried to greet me. And I just turned around and I said, fuck off. Right? Now, sorry to swear on air. But I immediately went up and I realized how badly I'd behaved, because she was powerful. She had voice in court. There were poor people sitting there and she was dealing with it. Is that bad behavior? It's terrible behavior.
The question is where to from here, and that's a question I'm committed to having multiple panels on this show about the entire sector. Zackie Achmat is being scrutinized this week. Equal education. There's a broader societal conversation and a sectoral one that need to happen with many themes that Megan and I are committed to unpacking in the weeks ahead, and also in the next hour when Lisa Vetten and Rudi Klabi will be joining me. The terms of their 2011 commission with our current frameworks just aren't good enough. In my subjective opinion, it wasn't sufficiently victim-centered. The scope was also to look at malicious rumor mongering. It was also to look at non-consensual behavior, allegedly. And one of the harder conversations in the world we currently need to have is about consensual behavior, where there is an unequal distribution of power, even if it is lawful. So, Zackie, from where you are sitting, where to from here?
Absolutely.
Many people who listen to you think that you have allowed yourself to be closely examined. Many people on my Twitter timeline are also disappointed. What do you want to finally say in the minute that's left?
I say to people who are disappointed, I think people like myself ought to submit ourselves to public scrutiny, and I'm willing to submit myself to public scrutiny. And I think that 2011 inquiry, looking back on it, we could have done better. But I would have appreciated if a newspaper that I had deep respect for,
The Mail and Guardian,
previously, didn't use people close to and a reporter who is close to one of the people who have been saying these things for a long time without coming up to me. Now, let me just say this. I'm really sorry if any person has felt threatened and not able to come to me. Any person. And if there's any shred of evidence, people must bring it forward so that I can make a reparation. Because I do not believe that I behave criminally, but I do believe that if there's any information, that I as a man, I as a black man, have a duty to address those wrongs.
Okay, thank you for coming in.